I've dealt with all kinds of people in my line of work, stubborn ones, nervous ones, even the occasional angry neighbor who thinks a noise complaint is the end of civilization. But nothing could prepare me for HOA Karen. It started like any other Monday morning. The sun was barely up, the air smelled like wet asphalt, and my daughter was standing at the corner bus stop, swinging her backpack straps and humming some cartoon tune under her breath. She was 9, shy, polite, the kind of kid who says sorry, even when she's the one being bumped into. I was sipping coffee in the driveway, still in my police uniform, about to head to the station. From where I stood, I could see the little yellow bus turn the corner a block away, and then I saw her. Karen. Short bobs, bright pink hoodie with HOA Pride written on it, and that clipboard, her magic wand of authority. She marched down the sidewalk like she was patrolling enemy territory. At first, I thought she was just passing by, but she stopped right in front of. I couldn't hear what she was saying from my driveway, but I saw the finger pointing, the stiff posture, that expression, the one people get when they think they've caught someone breaking a sacred rule, looked confused, clutching her backpack. I frowned, put my coffee on the hood, and started walking over. By the time I reached them, I caught Karen mid-sentence. "You can't stand there, young lady. That's HOA-maintained property. Bus stops are supposed to be on the other side of the street." Looked at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. "But this is where the bus stops," she whispered. Karen sighed dramatically. "Yes, but that's because people like your parents don't follow guidelines. This area is for members only." That was enough. I stepped closer. "Ma'am," I said, my voice calm but firm, "is there a problem here?" Karen turned, clearly annoyed, until she saw the badge on my chest. Her entire expression changed. "Oh, officer, good morning. I was just speaking to this little one about safety." "Safety," I repeated, because from where I was standing it looked a lot like you were scolding her. She smiled tightly. "Well, you know how it is. Some parents don't teach their kids the rules. The HOA is just trying to maintain order. We have certain regulations about where residents can gather." I tilted my head away. She puffed up like a peacock. "Yes, I'm the president of the Maple Oaks Homeowners Association. We take community standards very seriously here." Shifted behind me, hiding halfway behind my legs. I looked around, same quiet street, same neat lawns, same row of mailboxes gleaming in the morning sun. "This street," I said, "is part of the HOA." "Of course," she said confidently, "every inch of it, including that patch of grass your daughter was standing on." I nodded slowly, pretending to think. "Interesting," I said, "because according to the city zoning map, this bus stop on public property, which means it's not under HOA jurisdiction." For a split second she blinked, her smile faltering, then she laughed. "Oh, you must be mistaken. We've always considered this part of our community space." I gave her a long, polite smile. "Well, ma'am, I'll be sure to look into that." The bus pulled up, squealing to a stop, climbed on quickly, glancing back at me with wide eyes. I gave her a reassuring nod before turning back to Karen. She was still standing there, clipboard clutched tight, trying to recover her authority. "You know," she said, "it really sets a bad example for children when parents don't follow the same rules as everyone else." I met her eyes. I couldn't agree more. Her smile returned, brittle as glass. "Good, then maybe you'll consider repainting your mailbox. It's supposed to be HOA beige, not government gray." I just stared at her, not a word. She tapped her pen, clearly expecting a reaction. When she didn't get one, she added, "We take pride in this neighborhood, officer. What was your last name again?" "Chief," I said, as in chief of police. And I swear, for the first time since I'd moved here, she was speechless. I stepped closer, just enough to make her blink. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got work to do, but I'd appreciate it if you didn't approach my daughter again. I'd hate to have to file a report for harassment." Karen's mouth opened, then shut. Her eyes darted around like she was looking for backup that wasn't there. I got into my patrol car, started the engine, and drove off slowly. In the mirror, I saw her standing there, clipboard in hand, fuming quietly, pretending to write something down. Most people would let it go, but something told me Karen was most people. And as I pulled into the station that morning, sipping cold coffee and shaking my head, I already knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. You ever see someone realize, mid-sentence, that they just picked a fight with the one person they shouldn't have? That was Karen. But the thing about people like her is they don't quit, they just change tactics. For the next few days, things were quiet, too quiet. Went to school without incident, and I started thinking maybe she'd taken the hint. Maybe she realized harassing a police chief's kid wasn't the career move in her HOA empire. But on Thursday morning, I walked outside to find something taped to my mailbox, a bright orange envelope with the HOA logo and a bold stamp. Notice of violation. I actually laughed out loud. Apparently my trash can placement violated HOA Code Section 3, it had to be no more than 6 inches from the curb but not touching it. She'd even included a blurry photo, complete with time and date. I mean, who measures 6 inches of curb space? I could practically hear her voice in my head, rules are rules. So I took a picture of the violation myself and drove to work. But when I got home that evening, I noticed something else. The HOA newsletter had been slipped under my door. The headline read, "Maintaining Standards, No Exceptions." And there, right below it, was a paragraph about law enforcement residents setting examples. Cute, subtle, petty as hell. Didn't understand what was happening, of course. She just asked, "Daddy, why did Mrs. Karen take pictures of our trash can?" I smiled and said, "Because some people just need hobbies." But deep down, I felt that protective heat, the kind that builds when someone messes with your family. The next morning, I decided to walk to the bus stop myself. She held my hand tight like she expected another showdown, and sure enough, there she was. Karen, clipboard in one hand, coffee cup in the other, standing like a traffic warden waiting to strike. She gave me a tight smile. "Morning, Chief." "A morning, Karen. I hope there's no hard feelings about the notice," she said, sipping her drink. "We just have to keep everyone accountable." "Of course," I said. "Accountability's important, especially when you're enforcing rules you don't have authority over." Her smile froze. "Excuse me. You do realize the bus stop's city property, right?" I said calmly, "meaning it's not under HOA control." She adjusted her sunglasses. "That's funny because we have documents that say otherwise." I asked. "The HOA board," she said proudly. "We make sure every inch of this neighborhood stays in order, even if some residents think they're above the rules." The jab was clear. Squeezed my hand. I could feel her anxiety, that tiny tremor in her fingers. I leaned down and said softly, "Go on, sweetheart, bus is coming." She nodded, climbed on, and waved through the window. When I turned back, Karen was still there, lips pursed like she was savoring a victory. "You know, Chief," she said, "some of us worked hard to build this community. It's not fair when people move in and just bend things their way." I raised an eyebrow. "You saying the law bends to me or that I bend the laws?" Her eyes darted away. "I'm just saying rules exist for a reason." I chuckled. "And yet you keep breaking them. You've already crossed into my property once. Do it again and we'll have an official report." She blinked, pretending to look shocked. "Oh, come on, that's a bit dramatic." "Maybe," I said, stepping closer, "but it's not nearly as dramatic as trespassing charges." For a moment she didn't speak, then she did something strange. She smiled, a slow, calculated grin. "You can file all the reports you want, Chief, but around here I'm the one who decides what's right." Then she turned and strutted back up the street, heels clicking like punctuation marks on concrete. That line stuck in my head all day. I decide what's right. By evening, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cold drink, flipping through the HOA bylaws I'd downloaded online. 27 pages of fine print and self-importance, and buried inside was a clause I'd missed before. The HOA retains oversight only on private community property, not including municipal roads, sidewalks, or public transportation access points. Public transportation access points, that's legal speak for bus stops. So not only was she wrong, she was way out of bounds. I sat back in my chair, smirking. If she wanted to play HOA politics, fine, but she was about to learn that real rules have teeth. Still, a part of me hesitated. I didn't move here to start a neighborhood war. I wanted peace, quiet, and a safe place for. But peace doesn't come easy when you live next to someone who thinks she's a sheriff with a clipboard. As I looked out the window, I saw her house across the cul-de-sac, porch light glowing, blinds half open, and for just a second I could swear she was watching me through them. I raised my glass in a little toast and whispered, "Good luck, Karen, you just picked the wrong dad to mess with." Because from that night on, I decided, if she wanted to play by the rules, I'd make sure she understood what they really meant. And that's when things started to get interesting. I thought that after our little exchange at the bus stop, Karen might finally back off. Maybe she'd realized that poking a police chief wasn't the way to keep her clipboard clean. But the thing about self-appointed neighborhood royalty, they don't step down, they double down. By the end of that week, I noticed a pattern. Karen's car, a beige SUV that looked like it was powered by gossip, started parking across from my driveway at the same time every morning, always idling, always facing my house. At first, I told myself she was just being her usual nosy self, but then I caught her taking pictures of my mailbox, my car, Evan's bike leaning against the fence. That's when I decided it was time to do what any good cop does: investigate the investigator. I spent that evening digging through HOA records. It wasn't hard, all the documents were public, and it didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Karen wasn't just the HOA president, she was also the head of the compliance committee, neighborhood safety coordinator, and architectural review chair. In other words, she'd basically crowned herself Queen of Maple Oaks. The deeper I read, the more ridiculous it got. There were rules about the exact shade of mulch homeowners could use, how long a lawn could stay unwatered before fines started, and even a clause about unsanctioned gatherings, meaning backyard barbecues needed written approval. And the real kicker, children must be supervised while in any community-maintained area. The bus stop wasn't one of those areas, but it didn't matter. Karen was twisting that line like a politician in an election year. That night, I printed every page and highlighted the contradictions. I wasn't just going to argue with her, I was going to bury her in her own paperwork. The next morning, I walked to the bus stop again. And like clockwork, there she was, Karen, standing there with her clipboard like she was writing history. "Morning, Karen," I said casually. She smiled that saccharine smile that never reached her eyes. "Chief, how nice of you to join us again. I was beginning to think you stopped caring about community safety." I chuckled, "Oh, I care, especially when people confuse safety with harassment." Her eyebrows twitched. "Excuse me." I handed her a sheet of paper, a printed page from the HOA bylaws. "Just so you're aware, this bus stop isn't HOA property. According to Section 4C, it's considered municipal land." She skimmed it, her lips tightening. Well, maybe our documents need updating." "Maybe," I said, "or maybe you've been overstepping for a while." She gave a short laugh. "Chief, I know you're used to giving orders, but around here we have structure. I'm just maintaining peace." "Peace," I repeated slowly, "by yelling at children." Her cheeks flushed. "That's an exaggeration. I was correcting behavior." I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. "Next time you want to correct something, talk to me, not my kid." For a moment, she just stared at me, clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield. Then she tilted her head and smiled again. "You know, maybe we should have a meeting, discuss boundaries. The HOA loves open dialogue." I could tell she was bluffing. She wanted to see if I'd back down, but I smiled. "Sure, Karen, schedule it, I'll bring my notes." That wiped the grin right off her face. The bus arrived. As she got on, Karen leaned toward me, her tone suddenly syrupy sweet. "Oh, and Chief, while you're reviewing the bylaws, maybe take a look at Section 8, vehicle visibility. I'm sure the neighborhood appreciates your service, but a police cruiser parked overnight doesn't really say community charm, does it?" I gave her a long look, the kind of look that makes most people rethink their life choices. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" Her smile didn't waver, "Just doing my duty." "Funny," I said, "so am I." As she walked off, I noticed something. She wasn't angry, she was amused, like she just planted a trap and was waiting for me to step in it. That evening, I came home to find another letter, this time not a violation but an invitation. HOA special session, compliance review, attendance required. Underneath, in neat, bold print, a subject: resident chief. My wife looked at the letter and frowned. "They're holding a meeting about you." "Looks that way," I said, tossing it on the counter. "What are you going to do?" I smiled, picking it up again. "Oh, I'll be there, and so will the law." Because if Karen wanted a battle over rules, she was about to find out what happens when someone who writes real ones shows up with the evidence. And something told me she wasn't ready for that kind of order. The special HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 7. I half expected a few neighbors, maybe some awkward small talk, and Karen running the show like a talk radio host. What I didn't expect was a full-blown courtroom setup in her living room. She arranged folding chairs in neat rows, a little podium up front, and a printed banner that said, "Community Compliance Matters." There was even a plate of cookies on the table with HOA approved written on a napkin. When I walked in, the chatter died instantly. Half the neighborhood was there, retirees, parents, even the mail carrier for some reason. Karen stood at the front, glowing like she'd just been sworn into office. "Oh, Chief," she said sweetly. "So glad you could join us. Please have a seat, we were just getting started." I stayed standing, appreciate it but I'll stand, easier to hear the accusations. That made a few neighbors chuckle nervously, Karen didn't. She cleared her throat and began. "As president of the Maple Oaks Homeowners Association, it's my responsibility to ensure all residents follow our community's standards. Unfortunately, some members, even those in respected positions, seem to think those standards don't apply to them." The room got quiet, every eye turned toward me. Karen flipped a page on her clipboard. Violation 1, unsanctioned vehicle visibility. The chief's patrol car has been parked overnight multiple times, which falls under Section 8. No commercial or emergency vehicles may be visible from the street during non-active duty hours. Violation 2, improper waste bin placement. And Violation 3. Karen, I interrupted, before you continue, I just want to make sure, are you reading from an official city ordinance or your personal scrapbook? A few people snorted, someone coughed to hide a laugh, Karen's nostrils flared. "These are community rules, Chief," she snapped. "We all agreed to them when we moved here." I held up a hand. "Actually, that's not entirely true. I never signed the HOA covenant. You see, my property was grandfathered before Maple Oaks expanded its charter, which means your rules don't legally apply to me." She blinked, thrown off for just a second, then recovered. "That's highly irregular." "Not really," I said. "Page 3 of your own bylaws, paragraph 2, so you might skipped that while you were rewriting everyone's fence heights." The neighbors began murmuring, some pulled out their phones to check. Karen's smile wavered. "Regardless, Chief, this isn't about paperwork, it's about setting an example." "Funny," I said, crossing my arms, "because that's exactly what I came here to do." I reached into my folder and held up 2 printed photos, one of her SUV parked halfway across a neighbor's driveway and another of her walking onto my property with a tape measure. "See, Karen, if we're talking examples, this is called trespassing, and this," I said, pointing to the photo, "is called obstruction." A collective gasp moved through the room. One of the older neighbors whispered, "She did that to me too." Karen's face turned red. "This is absurd, I was performing my duties." "As an HOA president," I said, "you have administrative power, not police authority. You can't enforce laws, you can't inspect private property, and you sure as hell can't interrogate a child at a bus stop." The room was silent now. You could hear a pin drop or the faint squeak of her clipboard tightening under her grip. "I suggest you step back," she said quietly, her voice shaking, "before this becomes personal." "It already is personal," I said. "You've been targeting my family. So I've filed an official complaint with the City Zoning Board and the HOA Oversight Committee. They'll be reviewing your conduct next week." The murmuring turned into outright talking now, neighbors exchanging shocked looks. Karen's eyes darted between faces, realizing she was losing her audience. "You all don't understand," she said desperately. "This man is trying to intimidate me." I looked around. Anyone here feel intimidated? A few chuckles, one man raised a hand. "Only by her," he said. Karen slammed her clipboard down. "Fine, if the law wants to play tough, we'll play tough. You might think you're above the rules, Chief, but I'll find something that sticks." I smiled calmly. "Karen, I'm sure you will, but remember when you go digging, make sure you don't trip over your own evidence." I turned to leave, but as I reached the door, she called out, "This isn't over." I stopped, looked back at her and said, "You're right, it's not, but next time it won't be the HOA meeting, it'll be City Hall." Then I walked out, leaving her standing there, red-faced and trembling as the room buzzed with whispered conversations. When I got home, was already asleep. I kissed her goodnight and stood by her door for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. Karen wasn't done, people like her never are, she'd lost control and now she was going to come for it with everything she had. And I had no doubt, the next move she made was going to cross a line even she couldn't take back. I'll never forget the look on Karen's face when my badge caught the light. It was that split second when arrogance met reality and reality slapped first. But the crazy part, instead of backing off, she doubled down. Karen straightened up, fixed her hair, and sneered. "So what, you're a cop? You think that gives your kids special privileges? Because around here the HOA has rules, no exceptions." I could feel the blood rush to my ears. not because she insulted me, but because she had the nerve to say it in front of my son. I took a slow breath. Karen, you confronted a child at a public bus stop. That's harassment. HOA rules don't apply off private property. She crossed her arms, defiant as ever. We maintain the sidewalks and the signage. That bus stop is technically within the HOA jurisdiction. I almost laughed, technically. The kind of word people like Karen love to use when they're wrong but too proud to admit it. Before I could respond, one of her little board members, Greg, came waddling over with a clipboard. He was out of breath, probably from jogging across the street to defend his queen bee. Officer, chief, he said nervously, glancing between us. We didn't mean to cause trouble. There's just been a lot of concerns about kids waiting near the curb and… Karen cut him off. Don't apologize, Greg. He needs to understand we enforce the rules equally. I stared at her for a long moment. Equally, I repeated. Then how come your SUV is parked on the sidewalk every morning when you're waiting for your daughter? And how come your mailbox is still unpainted even though you find 3 other homes for that exact thing? For the first time she blinked, just once, but I caught it, the crack in the armor. Maybe, I continued, my voice calm but heavy, you should focus less on other people's children and more on your own compliance. Her mouth opened but no words came out. I turned, motioned for my son and started walking away, but I didn't get far. Because that's when Karen did what Karens do best, she escalated. Don't think you can intimidate us, Chief, she shouted from behind me. We'll file a complaint with the city, with your department. You can't threaten HOA officials. I stopped, turned back slowly. You go ahead and file that complaint, Karen, but just remember, when you make false allegations against law enforcement, those reports go straight through me. The silence that followed was delicious. Greg looked like he wanted to crawl into a storm drain. Karen just stood there, trembling with that familiar cocktail of rage and embarrassment. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought maybe she'd finally take the loss and move on. But Karen wasn't wired that way. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my deputy, laughing so hard he could barely speak. Chief, you're not gonna believe this. Someone just filed an anonymous complaint saying you were threatening HOA officials in uniform at a bus stop. I didn't even need to ask who. I leaned back in my chair, sighed, and said, let's have a little fun with this one. By noon, I'd pulled the CCTV footage from the city's street camera, clear as day, showing Karen wagging her finger in my son's face, then turning red when she saw my badge. I sent it to the HOA board with a short note. For your records, in case your official needs a refresher on what harassment looks like. An hour later, Greg called me privately. His voice was low, uneasy. Chief, can we meet off the record? I agreed. When we met at the coffee shop near the station, he looked exhausted. Look, I didn't sign up for this. Karen's been pushing everyone around. Half the board wants her out, but she's got all the homeowners scared she'll find them into bankruptcy. I sipped my coffee, watching him squirm. So what are you gonna do about it, Greg? He hesitated. We need help if she finds out I'm talking to you. I nodded. You won't have to worry about that. Because at that moment I realized something. This wasn't about one angry woman yelling at a kid. It was about power and fear. And if Karen was willing to cross the line once, she'd do it again. And that meant I had every reason, legally and professionally, to dig deeper. That night, as the neighborhood lights flickered on, I sat in my cruiser outside my house, watching Karen's windows glow from across the street. She thought she'd scared me with a fake complaint, but what she didn't know was that she'd just made herself the subject of a real investigation. You'd think filing a fake complaint against the police chief would be a bad move, but Karen had never been known for smart decisions. What she didn't expect was how fast her little kingdom would start crumbling from the inside. 3 days after her official report, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Apparently, Greg had finally grown a backbone and brought receipts. I didn't go, of course. I stayed home on my porch, sipping coffee while the neighborhood buzzed with whispers. My wife peeked out through the blinds. You think they'll actually do something this time? I chuckled. They'll try to survive her, but by the end of tonight, someone's gonna break. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Greg again, whispering like a man calling from inside enemy lines. Chief, you were right, she's losing it in there, screaming about conspiracies, calling people traitors. The treasurer just walked out, half the board, threatening to resign. I leaned back, smiling. That's democracy at work. What Greg didn't know was that I'd quietly tipped off the city's community management liaison, someone whose entire job was to make sure HOAs weren't abusing authority. They'd been curious about Karen for a while. The fines, the fake citations, even her inspection fees that never appeared in the official ledgers. Let's just say she was now on their radar. But Karen still didn't get the message. The next morning, she doubled down again, like a villain in a bad soap opera. A brand new notice of noncompliance was taped to my mailbox. Apparently, my grass was 1.5 inches above HOA limits. My son found it first. "Dad, are we in trouble again?" I knelt down beside him, looked at the paper, and smiled. "Not this time, buddy, this time she is." I called city zoning. "Hey, Mike," I said, "you still interested in that HOA case I mentioned? Because it just got interesting." By noon, Karen's HOA was under a formal audit. Meanwhile, Greg texted me updates like a man live tweeting a disaster movie. "She just accused the secretary of sabotage. She says you hacked her HOA emails. She's threatening to call the FBI." Every message made me laugh harder. But then came one that hit differently. "Chief, she's driving around the neighborhood filming people's yards, including yours." I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. When I stepped outside, sure enough, there she was. Karen, sitting in her silver SUV, phone in hand, slowly panning across my lawn like she was filming an episode of CSI, Suburbia. I walked toward her, calm but deliberate. She saw me coming, rolled her window down halfway. "Morning, Karen," I said, "doing a documentary." She smirked, "Collecting evidence. Some of us actually enforce community standards." I tilted my head. "You might want to turn that camera off, you're trespassing." "This is public property," she snapped. I pointed to the curb. "Actually, that's my easement. City-owned, not HOA, which means your little filming project violates privacy laws. You want to keep that video? I can bring a warrant over in 10 minutes. Her face drained of color. "You wouldn't." I smiled. "Try me." For once, she drove off without another word, but I knew that wasn't the end, it was just the eye of the storm. That night, I got an email from an unknown sender. No subject line, no greeting, just a link to a shared folder. Inside were PDFs, copies of HOA budgets, meeting notes, invoices, and right there in bold text, unauthorized expenditures, landscaping, events, personal purchases. Thousands of dollars, all signed off by Karen. The sender's name, Greg. The guy had finally flipped. I replied, "Good man, you just helped clean up this neighborhood." He wrote back instantly, "You don't understand, Chief. She knows I talked. She's coming after me next." I didn't like the sound of that. At sunrise, I drove over to Greg's house. His front yard looked like a war zone, garbage dumped, mailbox bent, and a bright orange HOA violation notice stapled to his door. It read, "Immediate fine for property neglect, $750, HOA President's Order." I stood there for a long moment, holding the paper, feeling the weight of it. Karen wasn't just power-hungry, she was vindictive, dangerous. And I realized something chilling. If she could do this to Greg, a board member, she'd do worse to anyone who stood up to her. The HOA board might have been breaking apart, but Karen wasn't going down quietly. She was about to go nuclear. And I was the only one standing between her and everyone she wanted to destroy. When you've worn a badge long enough, you learn to read people. And Karen, she was the kind of person who smiled when she was planning something nasty. So when I saw her waving cheerfully at my wife from across the street the next morning, I knew something was about to blow. My wife frowned. She's never been that polite before. I nodded slowly. "That's not a wave, that's a warning." Sure enough, by noon the storm hit. Greg called, his voice shaking. "Chief, she filed a restraining order against you. Says you've been intimidating her, following her, and threatening the HOA. I nearly dropped my coffee. "On what grounds?" He sighed. "Apparently your cruiser being parked outside your own house counts as surveillance now." I laughed. "So I'm stalking her from my driveway." But it wasn't funny, not really, because false filings like that go into the system, and the moment they do, the story spreads. Karen knew exactly how to twist the knife. By evening, the whispers started, neighbors looking at me differently, a few stepping out of their way to avoid small talk. I'd gone from police chief to that guy Karen says is harassing her. I kept calm on the outside, but inside, I was boiling. That night, I opened my laptop and went back to Greg's files. HOA budgets, fake fines, property inspection receipts, all leading to one big question: where was the money going? And that's when I found it buried in a community events invoice. Thousands paid to a vendor with an address that didn't exist, but the bank routing number, it matched a personal account under the name K. Karen. I leaned back, exhaled, gotcha. But before I could move forward, something else popped up on my phone: security camera alert. Motion detected at my driveway. I pulled it up, Karen, flashlight in hand, snapping pictures of my car, my mailbox, even the side of my house. That was it. I walked outside, calm, measured, professional. Evening, Karen, I said, voice steady. She jumped. Oh, I was just documenting violations, your lights above lumen limits and the driveway. Karen, I interrupted, you're trespassing again. She straightened, smirking. I'm the HOA president. I have the authority to inspect community properties. I stepped closer, just enough for the porch light to hit my badge. You don't have authority over police property, and right now that's evidence. She froze. Evidence of what? Fraud, embezzlement, harassment, take your pick. For a second her face went pale, then it hardened into that same smug defiance she always wore like armor. You think you can scare me? You're just another man who doesn't like a woman in charge. I almost laughed. Karen, I don't care who's in charge, I care who's breaking the law. She turned and stormed off toward her car. I didn't stop her, I didn't have to. The moment she sped away, I called my deputy. Get a warrant ready. We're pulling HOA financials, communications, everything. And make sure it's handled by city auditors, not local. She's got friends on the council. By the next morning, things were already in motion. Karen must sensed it because she started acting strange, parking her car blocks away, avoiding meetings. And then like clockwork, she tried one last desperate move. She sent a mass email to every homeowner in the neighborhood. Subject line: important, corrupt police activity in our HOA. In it, she accused me of abuse of power, intimidation, and even misuse of public resources. She said the HOA was under attack by a rogue officer with a personal vendetta. I could practically hear her voice in the words: dramatic, righteous, completely delusional. But she made one fatal mistake. She attached a statement of financial integrity to the email, her signature at the bottom, dated just 2 weeks earlier. The same document that proved she'd approved those fake vendor payments. It was the nail in her own coffin. Within hours, that email was forwarded, first to Greg, then to the city auditor, then to the county attorney's office. By sunset, I got the call. Chief, we've got her. Fraud reports, misuse of community funds, you were right. I didn't smile, not yet, because I knew Karen wouldn't surrender quietly. And sure enough, as the warrant went out, I saw her silver SUV fly past my window, speeding toward the HOA office, headlights cutting through the dark. My deputy's voice came over the radio. She's trying to destroy records. I grabbed my keys, heart pounding. Not tonight, she is. Because if Karen wanted a showdown, she was finally about to get one, under the same streetlights where it all began. By the time I reached the HOA office, the parking lot was lit up like a movie set. Red and blue lights bounced off the windows, cutting through the night. Karen's silver SUV sat crooked across 2 spaces, engine still running, driver's door wide open. I stepped out of my car, the gravel crunching under my boots. My deputy nodded as I approached. She's inside, he said. Office lights are on. We've got her surrounded, but she's refusing to open the door. I exhaled slowly. All right, let's do this by the book. We walked up together. I knocked once. Karen, I called, calm but firm. It's over, step outside, we need to talk. For a long second there was silence, then her voice came through the door, shaky but still dripping with that same arrogance. You have no right to be here, this is private property. Not anymore, I said, it's a crime scene now. Another pause, then the sound of drawers slamming, paper tearing. I gave my deputy a look. He nodded, moved around back. Seconds later, the door unlocked, and Karen stood there, clutching a folder to her chest like it was a life preserver. She looked different, the smugness was gone, her eyes were wild, rimmed red. You think you can destroy me? She hissed. I built this neighborhood, I made it safe, organized. I took a slow step closer. No, Karen, you made it miserable. She laughed bitterly. Oh, please, you're just angry I called you out. Everyone's scared of me because I'm not afraid to enforce the rules. Scared of you, I said quietly. No, Karen, they're tired of you, there's a difference. My deputy reappeared from the back door, holding a box of shredded papers. Caught her trying to dump the files, chief. Financials, fines, everything. Her face went white. Those are private HOA records. They're evidence now, I said, nodding for the deputy to read her rights. But when he started, she snapped. Don't you dare touch me. She tried to pull away, stumbled against a chair, and the folder she was clutching flew open. Papers scattered across the floor, bank statements, invoices, even printed emails. Right on top was a withdrawal slip for nearly $20,000 deposited into her personal account. She froze, staring down at it, the fight drained out of her like air from a balloon. When we escorted her outside, half the neighborhood was already gathered across the street. Greg stood at the front, arms crossed. My wife held our son close, whispering something to calm him. Karen stopped when she saw them all. You think you're better than me? She screamed. You think this place runs itself? You'll regret this. You'll see what happens without me. But no one said a word. Not one person moved to help her. For the first time, Karen stood alone. As we loaded her into the cruiser, Greg walked up beside me. I don't know how you stayed calm through all that, Chief, he said quietly. I looked at him because people like Karen only win when you lose control. She fed off fear. The moment we stopped being afraid, she lost everything. He nodded, staring at the flashing lights. The board's voting tomorrow. We're dissolving her presidency. Maybe we can actually fix this place now. I smiled faintly. Start by repainting that bus stop sign and tell everyone they can let their kids wait there without an audience. He laughed, a sound of relief more than humor. Later that night, after the last cruiser pulled away, I walked my son out to the same bus stop where this whole mess began. The air was quiet, peaceful. He looked up at me. Is Karen going to jail? I knelt down beside him. She's going to learn what happens when you make rules for everyone else and forget to follow them yourself. He nodded thoughtfully. So you won. I smiled. No, buddy, we did. The next morning, the sun rose over the neighborhood like nothing had happened. Kids waited for the bus again, laughing, playing, free. The air felt lighter. And as I stood there in uniform, watching my boy climb aboard, I realized something important. It wasn't just about Karen. It was about every person who'd ever been pushed around by someone who thought a title gave them power. Sometimes the best justice isn't just in court, it's in reminding people that decency still matters. As the bus pulled away, Greg waved from across the street, holding a clipboard and a smile that looked a little less nervous this time. The HOA was already rebuilding, new leadership, new rules. And this time, fairness was finally part of the agenda. I turned toward home, the morning sun warm on my shoulders. For the first time in months, it felt like a real neighborhood again. No fear, no shouting, just peace. And as I passed Karen's empty house, a small for sale sign staked in the front yard, I couldn't help but chuckle. Some people build kingdoms out of control, but eventually every kingdom falls, especially when it's built on petty fines and bad intentions. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.